Hey guys, Jake here with a small note before you start this episode. If the title didn't make it clear, this is actually part 2 of a 2-part Fantastic Four discussion. If you haven't listened to the first half of this discussion, go back and do that because a lot of that will be referenced here in this part. In part 1, we discussed our connection to the Fantastic Four and the first couple of movies that were made in 2005 and 2007. Today we're going to be looking at the 2015 Fan-4-Stick movie and the future of the Fantastic Four. Enjoy. Let's go to Fan-4-Stick because I think we've butchered those Tim Story films enough now. There's this one we're going to be on for a while. There's a lot to discuss on this film. So yes, Fan-4-Stick released in 2015, directed by Josh Trank. Reed Richards played by Miles Teller, Kate Mara as Sue Storm, Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm, Jamie Bell as Ben Grimm, and Toby Kebbell as Victor Von Doom. So this film would cost Fox $155 million to make, and as a lot of people know, only made $167.9 million at the box office, and it is considered one of the biggest box office blunders of this sort of, I would say, since the last 20 years or so. And sort of like we said about the Tim Story films, that they were very much a product of their age. Of the sort of mid-noughties, this film was definitely a product of its age as well. So at this point in the mid-teens, you could say, the hype was dark and gritty, coming off what Christopher Nolan did with the Batman films, and then we saw some success with some other films other filmmakers were doing, and then Marvel obviously was very successful with what they were doing on Netflix with Daredevil. So everybody was like, oh, dark and gritty, let's do that. And for some strange reason, Fox and Trank decided that was the approach to take the Fantastic Four in, which is, I don't understand why, because it doesn't make sense for the characters at all to be these dark, gritty type superheroes. So from the get-go, I thought this is alarming. It's just unnecessarily dark, this film. Like, I get you're really focusing on sci-fi elements, but they sort of wanted like maybe a superhero film meets like Interstellar, but there's no hope, no brightness, there's no color until maybe like the couple of final minutes of the film. And even it's also reflected in all the lighting and all the environments. It's just so dingy and dark. And it almost felt like this story is apologizing to the audience for being a superhero film. It's not embracing the weird and wonderful world of the Fantastic Four. These are weird, kooky characters. And while they leaned too much into this film, a complete departure to that in this rendition just, again, didn't serve them justice. So what do you sort of think of this film, the Fan-4-Stick?
I always see it in that weird history as well of attempts at horror in the superhero franchise. I remember, Josh Trank saying like, this is going to be the first superhero horror film, and they've been trying that for years now. They said the same thing with New Mutants, and they were like, this is going to be the first superhero horror film. And then, with Doctor Strange 2, it's Kevin Feige, this is going to be like the MCU doing horror and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, look, if this isn't working, just give it up, because, obviously we've had 2 bad examples. Don't get me wrong, I have faith in the MCU to at least get this right, but I don't think anybody can legitimately say that we're going to get a genuine horror film from, Disney. So, yeah, that was the biggest problem for me, is that going into this, it was like, really? Horror? And the Fantastic Four? Okay, again, if they had gone really out there with it, and you can see it in the cut of this film, that Doom sequence in which he's escaping from the facility. And, if you want to play a fun game at home, then play, what was reshot in this film, because you can kind of tell from the dodgy wig that had to be worn by, what was the Sue Storm actress again?
Kate Mara.
Kate Mara. Yeah, if you want to know what was reshot in this film, just look at Kate Mara's hair, because when she's wearing the dodgy blonde wig, which is quite a lot of the film, which goes to show how problematic this production should have been, then, again, this reminds me kind of, like you said, of New Mutants, of Rogue One, these films that have a lot of reshoots and a lot of differences to the trailers. A lot of people going, oh, that doesn't look like the film that we were kind of sold. We were missing entire sequences and shots from the trailers. So, already, and there was all this talk of, oh, it's going to tie into the X-Men, and MCU are doing their thing, DCU is doing their thing. We're going to have the Fox universe, and the Fantastic Four are going to meet the X-Men, and Simon Kinberg was like the mastermind behind all of this. And it was like, but why? What's the relevance to the Fantastic Four to just specifically the X-Men? And obviously now we're in this position in which that isn't really a problem anymore. But at the time, it seemed like two very different franchises to combine together. And yeah, it just makes for a Frankenstein of a film. It's just literally and I don't say this often, but I think it's an embarrassment. It's honestly the writing is, the way they chop it up, it's awful. It's terrible. And I think that because they have meddled with it so much, it's just a shell of a movie. I don't know what the original Josh Trank version was like, but there's very little of it here in this film. And that Doom sequence I mentioned earlier, like I said, they go hard with the horror. People's heads are exploding, they're hitting the walls, and blood is splattering on the walls. And I'm like, I can kind of appreciate what you were maybe doing, but maybe this is why the studio wanted to reshoot everything, because it doesn't work for the Fantastic Four. It doesn't work for this superhero genre. It's almost going into Bright, that Superman alternate film that we got. It's better to do something like that and just go, oh well, let's take the Boys, let's take these superheroes and make reflections of them with our own characters, rather than just taking the Fantastic Four and making them into something they're not. And yeah, it's just, this film doesn't fail just on a Fantastic Four origin level, just as a film. There's no character, there's no sense of any plot, there's no stakes, no reason for anything. And something I'm interested in what you think about is, in all of these films, I've never saw it as why is the Fantastic Four always eager to reverse what's happened to them? I never remember them being like, oh no, we've been struck by this thing. It's not like a rogue in X-Men kind of scenario, oh, this is, trouble in our lives. Yeah, I think the only example of that is Ben in the first film, and I think that's why that does work in the first film, the idea that they want to reverse it, because yeah, it means that Ben's life's been ruined, he's this hideous rock monster, and they show throughout the film, obviously annoyingly with the fiance, but with other people, they're scared of him. It's hard for him to live his life. He can't pick things up. So you understand that they want to reverse it because of that. But in this film, there's no reason for them to reverse it, really. They never show, for in some ways, Jamie Bell's life is, he's now become he's got a job with the military and stuff. And it comes from people like Sue. And I'm like, well, why does Sue care? I don't really see how it affects Sue's life. And all of them, that they're such hollow versions of their characters. So again, Sue, she likes patterns. Okay,
she was the worst. Sue, absolutely, she was just bland. Nothing interesting about her in the slightest.
No, and Johnny, he likes cars. That's the only thing I can take from this movie, is that he likes cars. And Reed, again, it's that terrible cliche of well, he's smart, that's a personality. It's no. And then Jamie Bell just has nothing at all. I honestly don't know what, again, even in the Tim Story films, you could somewhat buy these. I've, defended you all your life. The film doesn't do anything to justify that statement, but you can kind of buy into it a bit. But in this film, you can't buy it at all. You're no, we have never ever seen anything from you to suggest that you've backed him up all his life.
That ruined it. That was one of the worst parts of the film for me. I was so angry watching this, where there's no really true relationship built up between Reed and Ben. And like in the first films, like Ben Grimm, he's a pilot, he's done things, and that's established of what he can do and things like that.
Yeah.
In this film, he's just like this kid that comes from a poor family with like sort of no hopes or aspirations in life. And then Reed's like, hey, yeah, we're going to go to another dimension. I'll bring my friend along who has no experience, no training, no intellect regarding this field. I'm just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand. And the whole transporting to the other dimension, I'm just like, they're like, no, you can't go because you're not trained, which I'm like, yeah, that's fair enough. Like, you're going to another dimension. You haven't been trained. Like, you don't even have, at this point, they don't have powers. They're just a bunch of kids, really. And then they're like, oh, we'll just go. I'm like, why on earth would you decide to go to another dimension? Like, knowing that you're not trained at all. You're not even an astronaut. Like, this film, it has so many things wrong with it.
Yeah, I can understand again what Josh Trank was doing there. He was kind of trying to do again the horror aspect of like, oh, we shouldn't be doing this. Let's go like creep into the haunted mansion, and let's do this thing that we shouldn't be doing. So I understand it from a story point of view what the kids are doing, but like I said, it's a wrong perspective that the audience should be siding with the villainous government character. You shouldn't be in that position. And like you said, there's no reason why Ben should be with them because it's not in the film. He's like, Ben's always been there for him. He's like, has he? He just kind of stood next to you at a science fair. We didn't get any concept of like him helping you. He's given you like a screwdriver like twice. That's not being there. That's not like, like showing that they like, again, even the Tim Story film at least establishes that like Ben's been with him when they've gone to NASA and all that kind of stuff. And they've tried to pitch this idea. But also, even when they're in the other dimension, there's like such stupid things happen. They actually like watch Victor like fall into like this green energy thing. And he goes, Victor, we have to go back for Victor. And it's like, and they're like, what? He is clearly dead. Like obviously it turns out he's not. But, anybody would have seen that and thought he's gone. But Reed, of all people, who's this super intelligent guy, goes, no, Victor, yo, we have to go back for Victor. And it's like, and then later on, Reed looks even more stupid when he wakes up, sees his friend literally on fire and goes, oh, Johnny, oh no. And then like goes and helps Ben as if he knows that it's a supernatural thing. It's like, no, you would be traumatized if you saw like somebody you know. At this rate, you would think that they are literally burning to death. It's quite horrifying in that respect,
But this is the problem. Is that up to this moment, there's still no character development between any of these people.
No.
Because Reed, he's smart, but they give him no personality whatsoever. They give him no heart, no drive or anything. And then, like I said, Sue wasn't interesting. Johnny, they sort of got him as a hothead, but instead of being brash, he just seemed angry all the time.
It was just a father so like upset with his dad kind of thing. It wasn't like
upset with his dad thing. And it's like, why are you upset with your dad? I get that maybe he works a lot, but then it's like, oh, why didn't you come for work for me? He's like, yeah, okay. Like, so why didn't his dad ask him before? Like, what makes this part different now? And then, and like you say, yeah, Ben was a blank slate. He had really nothing to do. And then another thing that irks me is that we'll get into like the third act with Dr. Doom and stuff like that. But throughout this whole film, again, there's no adversary between Reed and Victor. Like, the only little bit is that when he sees that they're flirting and he's like, oh, you should be professional. But that's it. And like the rest of the time, it's like, oh, I'm your friend. Yeah, we're good friends. We're going to go on this mission together. And then when he comes back, he's like, oh, I hate all of you. I hate Earth. I'm going to destroy you. You're my sworn enemies. I'm just like, none of this has been built up. Like, you have no motivation to do what you're doing.
Well, do you know the worst bit about this for the team dynamic is that this is a Fantastic Four movie, and you don't, think back, they don't exchange words until the very final scene of this film. Like, go back and watch it. You don't get Ben, Sue, Johnny, or Reed in the same scene or room until the very, very end scene. And even though they have that action sequence together, they don't exchange words until that final scene, which is also one of the worst end scenes I've ever seen in my life. That entire, it's fantastic. is just laughable. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. Like, what should we call ourselves? Like, I'm so disappointed in Miles Teller. Like, he's so hammed that up. You know, like, oh, guys, I got it. It's as if they were joking on set. It was awful. So yeah, it's just the fact that they lose all the fundamentals of like film, writing, character, and that's why, you know, it doesn't even come across as just an attempt as a bad Fantastic Four film. It's just a bad superhero, bad film in general.
It's bad film.
You know, it's terrible.
It's not enough to ruin your world. Now you want to ruin mine. Victor. If this world must die, so that mine may live, so be it.
The cut as well is just awful. Like, I found myself, like, when we got to like the climactic battle at the end, I found myself, wait, what? Like, I just felt like this whole film was one giant first act, because it's the whole film is set up. It's just exposition, setup, exposition, setup, exposition, setup, and then when we actually get the characters together and it happens, and then we get, spoiler alert, the death of Franklin Storm, I felt as if that, yeah, I'm all for Franklin Storm to die, because there should be that sort of emotional weight, something that, you know, influences the team to come together. But that should have been like that at the end of the first act or the second act. And it just, the pacing of this film and the way and the edit was done, there's none of that involved. It's like set up exposition, he dies, end fight, end film.
The Doom escape seems like it was filmed as the midpoint or sort of like end of the first act, you know, second act of the film. But that then comes right at the end before the final act. So that's, again, why I find that this is like a Frankenstein of a film, because it does seem that comes across. And this does, again, one of the terrible things. The 1 year later, like, what a terrible way to, like, you know, have a film. And montage is used really badly in this. They're like, oh, we'll sell you on the idea. And these are the two worst crimes of this film to me, is that, you know, and I think this is going forward how the Fantastic Four should be. You know, this film is trying to, like, big up science, and it's all about, like, they're scientists. And this film is, like, so wrong in, like, celebrating science, especially the fact that, why is everyone in this film ragging on it so much? The fact that, like, he's there in school and the teacher is like, this isn't a magic show. I'm like, what? How can you buy into this? That this, like, science teacher would genuinely see, like, something teleport and then be like, this is dumb, you know? And it's just like, so how are we as audiences supposed to get invested in the wonder and, like, amazement of what Reed is doing if every character around him craps on it? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. And it's, you know, it's ironic because it was only like yesterday I was writing this thing about, you know, the Studio Ghibli film My Neighbor Totoro, and Roger Ebert said, you know, that what that film did was that, you know, it embraced the belief of the children in that story, that they believe in this mystical character, and the parents and the adults in the film never trash on it. They don't go with the American stereotype of, like, that's not real, and then it's the whole kid having to, like, convince them kind of thing. And it's like, why did they put that here in this film? And so in this film, they're supposed to celebrate science. You're already having that being, like, crapped on by, like, every character in the movie. And then even when they do come across this big wonder of science, they're like, we've got these powers. They want to reverse it. We want to get back. We need to go back there. We need to find a cure. We need to find a cure. How are you going to find a cure? What do you mean? As if they're just going to go into the alternate dimension, just find a vial there on the floor and go, yeah. Because once they get there, he goes, you know, oh, there's an energy source by there. We should go check that out. As if it just doesn't make any sense. As if they know what they're going to look at. As if they know what they're looking at. As if they know what they're dealing with. Like, it's a completely alien world. They've never seen it before. They're not just there taking rock samples. They're like, oh yeah, let's go check out what that is. Like, how? What are you going to do? Like, plug your iPhone into it? You know, like, it doesn't make any sense. And the 1 year later thing is like, that is just such a shoddy way of, like, you know, carrying on the story. It's
lazy writing. Yeah, it's just awful. And then I think for me, again, the biggest offense of this film is Doctor Doom, man. Like, everything I hated about the first one is in here. So the fact that he's got powers and you know, there's no adversary between him and Reed, all of that is here as well. But it's even worse here because, first of all, Like, I can sort of buy the first one where he's got electrical powers. I don't know. There's just something about it that's comical, and you go, okay, whatever. He's got electrical powers.
It's like metal. It's like magnetic or something.
Conductor of all that sort of jazz. I can sort of buy that. But in this one, it makes no sense where he's got his powers from. The fact that he can just burst people's heads open, like, none of that is really explained or given. It makes no sense. And then, obviously, his motivations are even worse because he's like, oh, I was happy on that world. You took me from that world, so I'm going to destroy Earth. It's like, I don't understand.
They try and build up this element to his character of like, they just drop in bits in the script in which he goes like, oh, well, our world's doomed anyway. Oh, climate change. And like, he's like,
but they didn't elaborate on that.
No, they don't. They just drop it in. It's just, and then we have to buy in.
Exactly. It's never elaborated on or explored. So it's just horrendous. And then to top it all off, again, at least in the Tim Story ones, they had the iconic helmet, and that's one of the things you want to see when you see Doom is that helmet. No, they got his fucking spacesuit, like, all melded onto his face. He just looked like a rejected droid from Star Wars. Like, it's just, the character design just looked awful. It's awful, and I hate it so much. It's just complete disservice to the character in so many ways. And at that point, I was already checked out of the film long ago. But when this part happened in the film, I'm like, oh man, you've just destroyed any remains of this film.
And again, we talked about stakes and stuff before. There's no stakes again because, what has the world seen them do? They've saved the world in another dimension. So again, people haven't even seen the Fantastic Four save the world. They were just off doing this in some alternate reality. So you're just like, okay, you did have, like, as far as they're concerned, all they've seen them do is just, the world was all crumbling and absorbing into some portal 1 minute, and then these people came out of the portal and then it stopped. And it's like, okay, so I assume that they maybe did something about it, but, for all they know, they don't know if they caused it or,
And then the entire time, the government's like, oh, you guys should be kept in check. We should be in charge of you. And then at the end of the film, all right, you did a great job. Here's an entire military base with a whole, a whole staff, and they're all like, we work for you now. And you're like, what?
No.
Where did this come from? I'm like, and also that really annoyed me because, like, you couldn't even give them the Baxter building.
No.
You couldn't even go back, like, because if that building, Franklin Storm worked there, surely they would go back there because Sue Storm and Johnny Storm and all that. It's just like, what are we doing here? And then at that point, when they start talking about the name of the team, I'm like, oh, wow, please finish this film.
Yeah, it's just bad. Like I said, even when Franklin dies, the fact that Johnny goes, Dad, and they're like shaking him for a good 10 minutes before like Doom even goes back into the alternate dimension. I'm like, if you cared that much, you would have immediately thrown fire at him or done something. And like you said, it's just the fact that, even like the music, this seems like, again, that it's like trying to have this like triumphant, like, heroic music, which doesn't fit quite with the vibe. And it's, like characters just disappear. Like, like Ben pretty much just disappears for the first, 20 minutes of this movie, and they have that montage of them constructing the device, and they're like, they show it all through montage, like, oh, let's show them, just like constructing it. And it's like you said, it's just lazy writing. And then the fact that we're supposed to buy into this fact of like, we've got a job for you, Ben. It's like, oh, he's been doing all this service to the country. He's been defending us in, like Afghanistan and Iraq, and like taking out tanks and stuff. And you're just like, when was this ever an aspect of the Fantastic Four? Why do we have to have this aspect of, like I said earlier, like the Michael Bay, oh, they need to be affiliated with the military, and they're now, a military operation and all that kind of stuff. And even at the end, you get this aspect of like, where's my children? They're being experimented on. And then Reed goes on the run. And you never get like a good show off of their powers even, like Reed never really uses the stretching powers really effectively. And like I said earlier, in video games, they've really effectively done it with the team and the dynamic. That's why I think the MCU could do some really fun stuff with them. But, what do we get in this film? We get, like, Reed weirdly use his stretch powers to change his face so he turns into somebody else. That just freaked me out. I was just like, what is going on here? That's just weird. But, yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And it's just terrible movie. I don't know. You don't get it very often where, like, a bad superhero film will be followed up by a worse one and then an even worse one. Usually, if it's bad, they get somewhat better. It's only usually if they're really good, they get somewhat worse. But this is like literally going from like terrible to awful to god awful.
Gotta say, it's fantastic.
Say that again?
It's fantastic.
Yes, it is.
Did they not learn anything?
They clearly they didn't. Well, I'll tell you, somebody learned a lot of things because in those first two films, if you look at the credits, one of the executive producers is our Lord and Savior Kevin Feige.
Yeah. So
all right, and Kevin Feige, he was his first film. He started as an assistant on the first X-Men film. And he's been in the background throughout all these films in the early noughties, taking notes, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and obviously now we have the MCU. So on that note, what do you think of the future of the Fantastic Four coming into the MCU? I think, personally, Marvel Studios can give the group their dues that they deserve. Obviously, we have Kevin Feige. He's worked on the previous two Fantastic Four movies, so I'm sure he knows everything that went wrong with those films. And he's proven himself to be a fantastic, creative lead in the studio. So I'm all for Feige taking the charge. But before coming up with the film itself, I think they really need to focus on hiring directors and writers that are familiar with the source material, that are big fans of the Fantastic Four. I do think the team's origins might need some reinvention to fit in with the modern day MCU because their origin is so steeped in like the 60s. Although I have a theory about that, but we'll get into that. And yes, and Marvel does a great job of meshing multiple genres into their, cohesive series. So giving Fantastic Four a unique family tone is a step in the right direction. And I think that's what they should focus on, is getting the tone right, getting that family dynamic right, then focus on the story. And then on the opposite side, the villains, give them serious conflicting motivations. Give them, something that makes them a legitimate threat to the Fantastic Four and possibly the world. And by doing that, you also strengthen the narrative of the Fantastic Four, the heroic team. So on that big level, I think they can do it. How they're going to do it, I have no idea. Do you have any ideas to that of what they could do with the Fantastic Four?
I think it is, difficult because I think, to me, because they are Marvel's first family, in my mind, I've never bought into this idea of, like, I think it was said that the Baxter Building was meant to show up in Spider-Man, wasn't it, in Far From Home?
There was rumors that in Homecoming, when they're moving out of the Avengers Tower, is that it's been bought by...
Yeah, and then I think in Far From Home, when he's web-slinging in the city at the end, I think there's like a billboard or something saying, come in soon. Apparently that was going to have like a 4 or something on it. So they experimented with that, but just didn't go with it. And I like the X-Men, I don't think that you can do a way in which you just go, and let's introduce these characters now. So like Doctor Strange, his origins come within the last few years. He's, becomes this character within the current timeline. But to me, because they are so steeped in like the 60s and as Marvel's first family, just how Captain America is the first Avenger, I think that they should kind of do what they did with Captain Marvel and Captain America and tell their story in the past and have it so that the Fantastic Four are the first family by having them be characters in the 60s or in the past in some way, and then have them get stuck in like the negative zone or the quantum realm or something like that. And then like Cap coming out of the ice, these heroes, whether it be through, I don't know, the Thanos snap or, through their meddling through time, they, or like Ant-Man did, they just find a way back into the present day. I think that, to me, would be the best way of doing it, because I think you can still hold on to the sort of like more historic elements of the Fantastic Four. You can show them like they do with Captain America and maybe slightly more goofy, costumes of their day, and you can have a bit more of the, space exploration aspects of it. But then you can have them land in the new day and be like, this is why you need to listen to us. We're so smart,
Did you read my notes before coming on the show? Because that's literally the idea I had.
Oh, really?
I was going to say, yeah, because like the quantum realm has been set up in the MCU,
yeah,
they could lean on that. And I would, exactly like you, I would say do a period piece like Captain America or Captain Marvel, set in the 60s, forming the team, setting up the characters, setting up the relationship between them all, then doing that, and then, at maybe halfway through the film or something, they reappear in modern day, maybe some help through other characters, maybe Hulk's, messing around with the quantum realm, or Hank Pym or something like that.
Yeah.
So it could definitely, and it's interesting as well, because I say that because Peyton Reed, who's obviously the director of the first two Ant-Man films, has very much expressed his love for Fantastic Four and has said for a while now he would love a shot at doing the Fantastic Four films. So, that would be an interesting angle to take it in. And yeah, like you, I think that would be the perfect way of bringing them into the modern MCU. I think it works.
Yeah.
I think,
I've seen the Peyton Reed stuff, and that, like I said, if he loves the Fantastic Four, like we said, that's something that you need, is somebody that understands the characters and loves them. But I am very nervous of like Peyton Reed, because again, I think that the Ant-Man films are the least cinematic, the most, even box office wise, they've not performed the best. They don't come across as like the big, action heavy story, plot driven stuff. They're just kind of fun films. And I'm like, no, like the Fantastic Four, after being through all of this, they need somebody who's like going to bring it to another level. So for me, I would be concerned about Peyton Reed doing it, just because I just don't think he's on that level of, say, like the Russo brothers, etc., or even like Scott Derrickson, etc. I think that you need somebody who's going to bring it to another level. And, I think by all means he could do that in like a TV capacity, but I just don't know if he would like level them up enough. And you might again get this kind of like Ant-Man vibe of where it doesn't have its like enough of a distinctive tone or personality.
I can tell you who you're going to get to direct this film. You're going to get Brad Bird on board.
Oh, the guy who's made the best Fantastic Four film, which is not a Fantastic Four film.
But the best one we've gotten so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think it'll be interesting to see Peyton Reed, and I know he is a big fan, but like you, I think we could maybe get a stronger director in there. And also on Doom, I think you can make him incredibly modern in the MCU. Because, like I said, he's got his powers are not in conjunction. Well, he doesn't have powers, but his origin story is not in conjunction with the Fantastic Four. So you could very easily set up Doctor Doom, whether in a Fantastic Four movie or another Marvel movie, as like another villain. And I was thinking about this. The country he's famous from being from is Latveria. It'd be interesting if maybe you could either have Latveria next to Sokovia, or he was in Sokovia at the time of the Avengers battle with Ultron. That would be a nice little tie-in as well. That could work. So, yeah, I'm all for it, man. And Doom, you know what? It'd be amazing. I've always said to get Giancarlo Esposito as Magneto, but man, Giancarlo Esposito as Doctor Doom would be amazing. Like, come on.
Yeah, I never heavily thought too much on like who would be a great Doctor Doom. But yeah, obviously Giancarlo Esposito would just be great as any villain as he already is. But yeah, I definitely think that he could be the next big bad, and I think it would be, you could buy into that aspect of why I think it would be difficult to just introduce the Fantastic Four of like, oh, they've been there all along kind of thing. I think you could do that with Doom though, because you've got that Latveria aspect. You've got the fact that he could have just been in this country. He's been there doing his own thing for a long time. Whereas I think it's hard to do that with Fantastic Four because they're meant to be based in New York. So you would be like, well, why have we never seen them before? Why have they never done this? I think the only way you could possibly do it is just that they've been scientists this entire time, and they've been influential in a lot of real world scientific stuff, but just not the superhero stuff. So maybe their powers get unlocked. So, because I was thinking about it, I was like, maybe even in the 5 years that something could have happened, or they might have been there. But I was like, but then you wouldn't buy, why would they not be there at the end battle, or why, would Cap and that not have like contacted them? So that's why, like you said, I think that they need to have been taken out of the world in some way or form. And also, Silver Surfer is obviously, related to the Fantastic Four because, comics, but also, Galactus, but also through that, that Rise of the Silver Surfer film. But I think he should get his own film. I think that he should have his own movie. I don't think that they should introduce that with the Fantastic Four. I think keep the Fantastic Four as the Fantastic Four, not just like, oh, this is our chance to get everyone to buy into the Silver Surfer too. Have him have his own series because he definitely deserves it, and have the Fantastic Four come in with Doctor Doom or some other sort of intergalactic character.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think bring him in because he's strong enough a character to have his own film or even a Disney Plus show. That'd be kind of interesting. But I kind of think like Galactus is awesome, and I would love Galactus to be like a big Avengers level threat. But I feel as if because we've just got Thanos, I kind of don't want another intergalactic threat. Because at the end of the day, all Galactus does is consume planets. So maybe leave that for like later down the line. But me personally, I think you could easily build Doom to be your next big bad of like your next like 3 phases or so. I think it can definitely be done. And sort of like, I don't want to, much like DC rely too much on Batman, I don't want to rely too much on Tony Stark and Iron Man and what he's done for the MCU. But much like what they did with Mysterio in Far From Home, having like a Tony Stark relation that he worked for him at some point, you could also do that with Doom. He was, because he is adversed in technology, he's a super genius, so it wouldn't be surprising if their paths crossed at some point. Do you know what I mean? Or if he had interaction with Stark Industries. He
was like belittling some employee and like, I don't know, do they speak like Latvian or something? He's just like, Tony Stark built this in a cave. He's just saying that in like Latvian or something. But I also think that what these films should represent and be about is that, again, you get these films with like, oh, Ant-Man is like the heist film, and, the Iron Man films are all about, talking about like warfare, and the Captain America films are about, patriotism and all that kind of stuff. I think that they really need to focus on like the science aspect and like the amazing aspects of space and science, and not just belittling it as like, people just crap on it because they're like, oh, it's a magic trick, like focus on the science, focus on what makes them good scientists, including Sue, and I think that's why the casting is critical with these characters. I think the leads, Mr. Fantastic and Sue, need to be older actors.
It's got to be John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. Yeah. It has to be. And then my fan casting for Human Torch is Taron Egerton.
Ah, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I hadn't thought that one.
I think he would be a great younger brother to Emily Blunt, and he's got that energy, that charisma that the Human Torch has.
Yeah, I think there's been word of like whether Emily Blunt is going to be in the Doctor Strange film, so it's like, unfortunately, I don't know whether she's going to be like the love interest there, or going to be like an alternate version of a certain character like in the multiverse. But if not, like I said, I think she'd be great for Sue Storm. But if not, I think you need to have these 2 older actors who you can buy as a couple. But like I said, John Krasinski and Emily Blunt are already married, so that sells that. But yeah, you just need to have that believability that they're not just some 20-year-olds, that they are like invested in science, invested in like space exploration, big up, like we said, that 60s, aspect of like the more sort of campy, scientific exploration. And that's, like I said, what the other films need to do as well. Is the other MCU films have done that effectively. They haven't gone, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man said he's a crime fighter, he's your neighborhood Spider-Man, he's going and stopping the people from stealing money, that kind of stuff. Whereas the MCU films have gone, no, the Avengers, they stop the world level threats. They've shown where what they specialize in and what they do. And I think they need to do with that with the Fantastic Four. They need to show if they are these people of science, then they get involved in all these like scientific experiments, and villains who are involved in, you know, mutations or, you know, stuff that involves, you know, space. They need to show that, and that needs to be a big aspect that defines them as characters. And the family dynamic, obviously. They're the first family, have that family dynamic.
I was going to say, all that stuff you said is great, and that needs to be there. But at the roots of it all, and first, is family first.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You need to. That is the core of the Fantastic Four. If you don't have that, you could very much like the Josh Trank movie. You can give me all the sci-fi stuff you want, but if I'm not invested in them as a family, I don't care. So that's got to be a big element there. What about Ben Grimm? I was kind of feeling, hear me out on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Carl Urban.
Yeah, I could see
no,
it.
he can't.
Yeah.
He can't.
Oh.
He's Scourge in Ragnarok.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
again,
fuck.
with the Fantastic Four, and I've never sort of felt like, oh, that would be the perfect person. I'm kind of open to interpretation of what they want to do with it. And again, I was sort of like open even with Michael B. Jordan, but I think that the studio was just really gutless in that they didn't actually then have somebody of, who was black of play Sue Storm. I thought that was really, really... I thought that was embarrassing, to be honest. I was like, if you're going to do this, you should have done it. Like, I thought that was pathetic.
Commit all the way. Yeah.
Like, it's almost as if they were tarnishing their own message. They were like, oh, well, we're going to be diverse, but we're going to admit to ourselves that we can't quite go there by having this white character who outshines the black character, which is even worse. I thought it was awful what they did there. Thankfully, Michael B. Jordan, had Black Panther, which was then, as him almost saying like F you to that film.
I think, given a better film and script, I think Michael B. Jordan could have been a fantastic Human Torch. Absolutely. It's just a shame. But yeah, I guess we'll see, man. I mean, I think from everything Marvel has announced so far, they seem to be, pretty on lock for the next 5 years or so. And, what with all these delays, that could be pushed further back. So it's going to be a while before we see the Fantastic Four. So the only thing I can say is that because they've got that time, spend a lot of time on it, perfecting it, crafting it, getting the right people on board, and this could be as big as the Avengers films. I genuinely believe that. They could be the new face of the MCU. I wholeheartedly believe that.
Do you think, like I said earlier, do you think that their origin is also rooted in this idea of like, oh, we need to reverse what's happened? Because again, would you want to see it of, we get these powers and then what's the next step? To me, that's like where they've always struggled, is that they get the powers. What do you do immediately after that? Do you have the kind of, Doctor Strange, obviously in that he's trying to sort of fix his hands and everything, and then he comes across it, and then he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. So you need to have that transition of how do they become the Fantastic Four? How do they embrace their powers? It
would make perfect sense, as he's always done, to sort of glue everything together. Bring in Nick Fury. Nick Fury's a good one, that he's an anchor that you could use, that he could steer these guys into the direction we need them to.
And is it the Illuminati? That's like Reed Richards, the sword,
and shit, and Nick Fury's doing sword now. He's doing galactic stuff, so it would make kind of sense.
Yeah, that's why again the Captain Marvel approach was quite a good one, to sort of like have that legacy of that character in the past, and I think they could do the same thing here, but just not be too on the nose about it of like, oh, we're doing the same thing again. But even there, like you said, he could have taken the Fantastic Four with him into space, and that could be like why again we haven't seen them for so many years. And I think the Skrulls have obviously got a history with the Fantastic Four as well. They've been introduced through that, and I would actually be on board with the Captain Marvel directors doing Fantastic Four. So even though people said about Peyton Reed, again, the Captain Marvel directors might not have that relation or link to the characters, but I think that they have that understanding of timeliness.
they have been replaced, those directors.
Yeah,
they're not doing the second one.
Exactly. That's why I'm kind of like, I feel bad for them. Let's give them something. So I think that because they did a good job of telling this sort of period piece with Captain Marvel and embracing the kind of sci-fi stuff there, I think they could do quite a good job. And you'd still get the sort of female aspect by bigging up Sue Storm, etc.
And give me a Doctor Doom series, you cowards! You cowards, just do it!
Give me Herbie the Robot, you cowards.
Oh, God. Can you... A Disney Plus animated series about Herbie the Robot?
No, animation's not good enough for him anymore. He's leveled up.
He's got to go up to the live action.
To the big boys.
So I think, that brings us to the end of that. I'm glad we finished on a more positive note, because boy, oh boy, were we ripping into those films
exactly,
earlier.
Yeah. Deservedly so, especially with Fan Four Stick.
Yeah, deservedly so. I think we can honestly say we're not fans of those films. And after rewatching them for this show, I can honestly say I don't think I want to watch those films ever again. Because that was hard, especially Fan Four Stick.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so let's get out of here then. So, us plugs. Where can you find us? So you can find us, Capes, Cows and Masks, on Twitter at Capes, Cows, Masks, and we are on Facebook at Capes, Cows and Masks. Subscribe and follow us on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and if you're feeling generous, give us a review. It all helps. Give us a like, share, follow, and spread the word of Capes, Cows and Masks to all your friends. And for myself, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at SweatyJake and on Letterboxd at Jake Hart. Dave, where can everyone follow you and see what you're getting up to?
You can follow me at David Oscar on Twitter. You can also catch me on Letterboxd at David Oscar. And you can catch me on freshtakehub.com. Like I said earlier, talking about films which are nostalgic, which have, links to franchises such as, Studio Ghibli, Star Wars, Marvel, all that kind of fun stuff. And, with this show, if you, support us, follow us, review us, because, there's lots of fun stuff coming up. We've got, Wonder Woman, WandaVision. There's lots of reasons to follow us and subscribe, because we're going to be talking about lots of good superhero content, hopefully, after we've gone through some very bad content this week.
Yes, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's Wonder Woman! Although, it looks like I'm going to have to see Wonder Woman in Wales, because Bristol ain't opening.
Yeah,
cinemas.
True, yeah. You could almost use that theme for WandaVision as well. WandaVision. It kind of does work.
You definitely could.
Wonder Woman, Wonder,
Great stuff. So with that, everyone, we'll see you very soon with our next episode. Take it easy and stay safe out there.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.